The wind was a goddamn hammer against the house. Felt like it wanted to tear the boards right off. I was on the first floor, trying to get another sheet of plywood up over that big front window, the one that looked out onto what used to be our street. Now it was just gray, water, up to my chest. Sarah was upstairs, safe, I hoped. Safe. The word tasted like rust in my mouth. I swung the hammer. The nail shrieked as it sank into the old wood. Yeah, just like a scream. A gust came then, sharp and cold, pushing through a crack I'd missed near the window frame. It sounded like a long, drawn-out moan, honestly, like someone pushing air out of lungs that were half full of water. My spine went stiff, you know, the way it does when something just doesn't sit right. But no. Nah, it was just the wind, I told myself. This house was old. Every gust found a weak spot, made some new creak, some new whine. I looked closer at the crack. Just a dark line in the old wood grain. Nothing, just the wind. I shook my head, kept hammering. A bit later, I was crouched low, trying to get a better angle on a stubborn screw. It was near the bottom of that same window, the one I'd just blamed on the wind. The water outside was already halfway up the glass, murky, swirling. And then it happened. Just a flash, a hand, pale, maybe even a little fat, you know, like it had been soaked too long. It swept past the glass, just under the surface of the water, quick as that. Gone. My heart actually jumped. My fingers went cold where they'd been gripping the wet glass. I rubbed my eyes hard. Too much work, too little sleep. Had to be. I looked again, staring at the spot. Nothing. Just that same dirty, gray water, reflecting the dull sky. It was probably some debris, a branch or something. Yeah, that had to be it. But that cold feeling on my fingertips? It lingered. Like the glass itself had turned to ice. I was trying to get Sarah upstairs, move the last of the dry supplies, when I heard it. From downstairs, from that floor that was already soaked. A scratching. Not like a mouse, not small. This was bigger. Like claws dragging across wood, real slow and deliberate. Then, a splash. You know, like something heavy had leaned into the door and the water just gave way. Then a thud, a really heavy one. Not a crash, a thud. Like something big, maybe a tree trunk, had just smashed into the front door. The house shook a little. I froze, holding Sarah's hand so tight I thought I might break it. She didn't seem to notice. The scratching stopped after the thud. All I heard was the water, dripping. At first, just little drops from under the doorframe. Then, it was a steady stream. A steady, cold stream running over the threshold. It wasn't the storm anymore. I knew that. My gut twisted. I backed away, pulling Sarah up the stairs faster. I could feel the cold radiating up from the first floor. A damp, heavy chill that promised rottenness. Upstairs, I looked back down at the water filling the living room. It was creeping higher, licking at the bottom of the couch, swallowing the rug that used to be a safe place for Sarah to play. Everything I'd done, every board I'd nailed, every lock I'd checked, it was all against something coming from outside. Something that walked on 2 feet or crawled on 4. I hadn't thought about something that swam. And now, the water wasn't just a barrier anymore. It was a doorway, a pathway, for them. I swallowed, but my mouth was so dry. It tasted like metal, like old pennies, from breathing in all this damp, heavy air. This wasn't a refuge anymore. This house, our home, it was just a trap waiting to spring shut. I led Sarah to the window on the second floor, just for a moment, to give her something else to look at besides the rising water inside. She was holding her small, white plastic toy boat, the one with the blue trim, her favorite. As I looked out at the churning brown water that was now a restless lake outside our window, I saw something. Just for a second, another boat. Small, white, plastic, exactly like Sarah's. It drifted past, listing a little, before the current tugged it away. I looked down at Sarah. She was still clutching her identical boat, looking up at me with those wide, innocent eyes. I looked back out, but the other boat was gone. Just murky water. A chill spread through me, cold and deep, the kind that makes your blood feel thin. My heart started to hammer, a frantic rhythm that somehow seemed to match the roar of the wind and the gurgle of the water outside, like it was all one big, messed-up symphony of fear. The roof was still a damn mess, a sieve in places. I had to get that tarp fixed, at least temporarily. Sarah was sitting on a folded blanket in the hallway, playing with her doll, making little mumbles that were supposed to be conversations. "Daddy, is the rain going to stop?" she asked, her voice small, a fragile thing in the din. "Soon, honey," I lied, pulling at the corner of the tarp, trying to stretch it over a particularly bad spot. "Just a little more, and then it'll be over." I needed the wrench, the big one. It was usually in the red toolbox in the corner of the attic. I reached in, my fingers fumbling through the tools, expecting to feel the familiar cold steel. Instead, I grabbed something rough, something small and rusty. I pulled it out, a pair of pliers. Old, pitted with rust, and I didn't recognize them at all. They weren't mine. I certainly didn't remember ever seeing them before. I mumbled to myself. Probably just misplaced the wrench, or used it for something else. My mind felt like mud these days, everything a blur. I tossed the strange pliers back into the box and shrugged. Didn't matter. I needed the wrench. So I went downstairs, wading through the shallower water that had already claimed the landing, telling myself maybe I left it in the kitchen. The kitchen, it was a wreck. Water up to my shins, everything floating, turning the whole room into a sick, watery collage. I moved a few things, mostly garbage, just trying to see where anything was. And there it was, not on the counter where I'd normally leave it, not on the workbench. It was in the laundry basket, mixed in with a couple of Sarah's old t-shirts, half submerged. Christ, I was really losing it. As I reached for the wrench, my eyes caught something on the counter, a photo frame. It had been sitting there for years, a picture of Sarah, her mom, my late wife, and me, smiling on a beach. It was a good day, a sunny day. I remembered it well. But the photo looked different, faded somehow, the colors muted, almost drained out. I ran a hand over the glass, thinking it was just the dim light from the weak flashlight, or maybe a smudge. But when I lifted the frame, held it closer, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't a smudge, and it wasn't just the light. On my wife's wrist, just above her hand resting on my shoulder, there was a mark, a splotch, dark, almost black, like a bruise, but patterned, like scales, faint, hard to see at first glance, but definitely there. I knew, absolutely knew, it hadn't been there before. Her skin was always so clear, so fair. My breath hitched. It was just a picture, a memory, but that mark. A soft tick-tick-tick sound came from the wall behind me, like water slowly, steadily seeping through plaster. I stiffened, straining my ears. The sound stopped. Nothing. Just the lapping of the water and the distant shriek of the wind. I must be imagining things. This whole damn situation, it was getting to me. I had to focus.
I slammed the picture frame back down onto the cabinet, the sound echoing hollowly in the half-flooded room. No, no, no. I was tired. That was it. Just tired. I had to protect Sarah. That was the only thing that mattered. I tried to push the image of the scaled wrist out of my mind, the strange pliers, the boat. I went back to the windows, checked the boards again, running my hand over each one. Felt for any weakness. It was fine. It had to be. But then, as I leaned against the wall, the same wall where I'd heard that tick-tick, a wave of cold washed over me. Not the usual damp chill of the house. This was different. A penetrating, raw cold that seemed to come from within the wall itself. Like breath. I moved away quickly, my skin crawling. No, just the house settling. Just the storm breaking everything apart. Later, the storm was still screaming outside, a furious, relentless sound. Inside, it was a little quieter, just the pervasive slosh and drip of water. I was reading to Sarah from her favorite picture book, the one about the little bird and its cozy nest. The flashlight beam danced across the page, making shadows stretch and shrink. And the little bird flew home safely in its nest, I finished, my voice rough from disuse and strain. Sarah giggled, a strange, hollow little sound.
It didn't quite reach her eyes. "Daddy, look," she piped, pointing a small finger at the page. I leaned in, thinking she'd spotted a beetle or a particularly juicy berry. My blood went cold. On the page, right there, where the little bird's nest should have been snug and warm, was a drawing. A crude, childlike scribble, but utterly horrifying. It was a face, bloated, so swollen it was almost unrecognizable, with wide, dark holes for eyes. It was staring out of the nest, out of the page, right at me. It hadn't been there a second ago. I swore to God it hadn't. My hand started to tremble violently. I grabbed the page, the thin paper crinkling under my fingers, and I just ripped it, torn it right out of the book. Sarah looked up at me, her blue eyes wide and innocent, maybe a little confused. She just wanted me to explain the picture, I knew, but I couldn't. My breath was gone. I stared at the torn piece of paper in my hand, then at the empty, jagged space in the book. The image of that grotesque, swollen face seemed to burn itself into my eyes. Even when I squeezed my eyelids shut, I could still see it, floating in the darkness behind my eyes. It wasn't just in the book. It was in my head now. When Sarah finally drifted off, her small hand still clutching the defaced book, I sat alone in the dim flashlight glow. The ripped page, now just a crumpled ball in my shaking hand, felt impossibly heavy. The water outside still slammed against the walls, an endless, monotonous sound that felt like it was wearing away at my sanity, little by little. My gaze fell on the small table beside the armchair. Our old family Bible was there, always had been, but the cover was slightly ajar. I picked it up, my fingers numb. I opened it at random. The old, thin paper, smelling of age and faint dust. And there it was, right in the middle of a hymn, written in shaky, almost childlike letters. "Daddy, are we safe underwater?" My blood ran to ice. The handwriting, I knew it. It was Sarah's. Her loops, her little quirks, unmistakable. But I hadn't taught her to write underwater. We'd practiced her name, simple words, not this, not this. My grip on the Bible tightened, the old leather creaking. A cold, deep cold surged through me, starting from my fingers and spreading through my entire body. I squeezed my eyes shut,
Tried to conjure up an image of that sunny beach day, of my wife's smile, of Sarah's innocent laughter. But all I saw were those awful bloated faces, thousands of them, all submerged, all staring out of the murky water, and waiting for us. I woke up with the splash. Not a noise, just the feel of it, cold against my side. I shot upright, heart slamming against my ribs. Water. It was up to my knees now, here on the first floor. Not just the edges of the room, but a proper deep pool. The air was heavy, damp, tasted of mold and something else, something foul, like dead leaves left to rot in a bucket. My armchair, the big, worn one by the fireplace, was mostly underwater. Its floral pattern, already faded, looked almost dissolved, like paper left too long in a bath. I pushed myself up, waded towards it. My feet squelched on the submerged carpet. Something bumped against my leg. I flinched, yanked my leg back. Just a book. A photo album. Our old family album. It must have floated off the coffee table. I picked it up, the leather cover soft and swollen with water. The pages inside were stuck together, a thick, pulpy mess. I tried to pry one open, carefully, the paper tearing a little at the corner. It was a picture of me and Sarah on that trip to the lake. We were laughing, caught mid-splash, but the water had done something to it. Our faces, they were distorted, blurred, like we'd been peering through a bad reflection. Sarah's cheeks looked puffy, mine too. Our smiles stretched too wide, too thin, like we'd both been underwater for a little too long. It wasn't just water damage, though. It couldn't be. It felt like the film itself had swollen, warped the images from the inside out. I peeled the page off, but the faces, those soft, bloated faces, they stayed with me. Just some old photos, damaged by the flood. That had to be it. I told myself that, over and over. We were pushed higher now, to the second floor. The water down below kept sloshing, a constant, irritating sound. Sarah was huddled on the landing, pulling her knees to her chest. "Daddy," she mumbled, her voice small, "my tummy hurts."
I sat beside her, rubbing her back. "It's okay, honey bear, just a little longer." I didn't know what was okay anymore, or how much longer. Then I heard it, a scraping. Not a quick, sharp scratch like a rat. This was slow, deliberate, a heavy, rhythmic drag. It was coming from right under us, under the floorboards. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. Like something huge, something with claws, was moving just beneath the wood. And with it, a smell. It seeped up through the cracks in the floorboards. That same musty, rotten smell, but stronger now. Like a wet, moldy blanket had been left to fester for weeks. It made my stomach flip. Sarah stiffened beside me. She didn't look at me, just pointed a small, trembling finger at the floor, right where the sound was coming from. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely there. "The floor is breathing." I looked down. There was a thin film of water in the gaps between the old floorboards, just small puddles that hadn't found their way downstairs yet. And right there, where she was pointing, a ripple. A faint, almost invisible ripple. Like something heavy had pressed up against the wood from below. Something that moved and displaced the water above it. And then I felt it. A cold, damp breath on my face. It came from the floor. A current of chilled, wet air, carrying that smell of decay, wafted up. It hit me, right in the face. My skin crawled. I felt a sudden urge to gag, to push it away.
But it was just the air, just the house, you know, breathing, settling. I tried to tell myself that. The water kept rising. It was already lapping at the bottom step of the second floor, a dark, churning pool down below. My legs felt heavy, my clothes clinging to me, damp and cold. We were truly trapped up here. Then I heard it again, a moan, low, gurgling, like someone trying to scream through a mouthful of mud. It came from downstairs, from the water. My heart squeezed. I had to see. I had to know. Slowly, my legs feeling like lead, I crept to the railing. I peered over, my breath held. Below me, floating in the murky water that now filled our living room, was one of them. Its face was swollen, distorted, almost beyond recognition. But the eyes, pale, empty. They were fixed on me. They knew I was there. It was like they were looking right into my head. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, a hand rose from the water. Flat, puffy, the fingers splayed, pale and soft, like boiled potatoes. It was beckoning, not angrily, not violently, just beckoning, as if inviting me down. I scrambled back, stumbling on the landing. My heart was going 1,000 miles an hour. Beat, 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 too fast. I had to block the stairs, had to. There was an old, heavy wooden chest near the banister. That'll do it. I tried to push it, but it was massive, solid oak, didn't budge. I strained, shoulders burning, legs shaking. Nothing. I tried again, putting all my weight into it. Still nothing. It felt like it was nailed to the floor. But then I heard a faint, wet pop, like a cork coming out of a bottle underwater, real soft. The chest, it felt lighter, suddenly, unnaturally lighter. I barely pushed, and it slid, without a sound, down the stairs, into the waiting water below. It slammed into the banister with a muted thud, then floated, settling awkwardly against the steps, blocking maybe 2 or 3 of them. From below, I heard a soft, wet gurgle, the sound of air escaping. The zombie was still there, and it moved. It didn't struggle, didn't claw. It just flowed, over the chest, a smooth, almost graceful motion, like some awful waterlogged seal. Its bloated body, which should have made it clumsy, somehow made it easier for it to glide. It was too easy, too quiet. A chill, a deep, bone-rattling cold spread through me. It wasn't just physical. My skin prickled. And then I felt something brush against my ankle. Soft, slippery, slimy, like old, rotten flesh. I kicked out, yelling, spinning around. But there was nothing there. Just the water. Rising, higher, always higher. The rules, they were all wrong. Obstacles didn't work. Strength didn't matter. These weren't just dead bodies. They weren't just stupid, shambling things. They understood. They watched. They lured. And they moved with a strange, horrifying ease, a terrible grace that made my skin crawl. The chest feeling light, then sliding so easily. It felt like a trick, a sick, twisted joke playing out just for me, deliberate.
I looked at Sarah, holding her tight, pressing her small, shivering body against mine. She was my whole world. My breath hitched. Panic bubbled up. If I had to become something awful, something monstrous, to save her, I would. I would. No question. Sarah suddenly started humming, a soft, reedy sound against my ear. It struck a chord, a deep, unsettling chord, in my memory. That children's show, the one I'd heard on the radio days ago when things had just started. The one where the host, with that too wide smile, whispered about things blooming in rot. I'd tried to push it out of my head, fought to keep my sanity intact. But Sarah, she was humming it, every note precisely the same. Her eyes, innocent and wide, looked up at me. Had the horror outside somehow crawled into her? Or had it always been there, just waiting for the water to rise, for the world to break, so it could finally show itself? The thought was colder than the water, colder than dread itself. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Sarah said, breaking the awful spell of her humming. "I know, honey. Just a minute." I had to focus, had to do something. I found the last 2 cans of peaches and a bottle of dirty-looking water, our last. I tried to make it a game, prying the cans open, trying to find a clean spot for her. The peaches, they weren't right. When I opened the can, the fruit inside was gray, not yellow. A sickly, dull gray, as if they'd rotted inside the tin, fast. My stomach clenched. "Must be a bad can," I mumbled, more to myself. But a faint, metallic taste, not from the can, but from the air, from the smell, lingered in my mouth. I still had a little water left, in a bottle, not much, but enough to try and rinse them. Maybe it was just the surface. I poured a little water into the murky sink. As the water sloshed around, I caught my reflection in the dark, still surface. My face was pale, gaunt, haggard. But my reflection, it didn't quite match me. It was looking at me. And then it smiled. A slow, faint, knowing smile. A flicker of something, something other than me. I pulled my head back so fast I nearly fell. My heart hammered. Just a reflection, a trick of the light. God, I'm so damn tired. I backed away from the sink, shaken. Before I could process it, Sarah's small voice piped up. "Daddy, look, look again." I turned. She was in the living room, which was now filled with water up to our waists. She was pointing at the main window, the one I'd boarded up so fiercely. But now the water was so high, it was just another glass barrier into the churning world outside. Under the murky surface, at first, just a pair of eyes, staring directly at us. Then, slowly, a face, gaunt, pale, so pale it looked almost blue-white in the dim light. It surfaced, pressing against the glass. Its mouth was open, a wide, distorted O, a soundless scream that nevertheless echoed in my bones. It was close, so close I could see the awful texture of its skin, swollen and stretched. Its eyes, they were so focused, so intelligent. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at Sarah. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore through my throat. I grabbed Sarah, pulled her into my arms, pressing her face against my shoulder so she couldn't see. The glass rattled then, not from the storm, from the creature outside. It was pushing against it. I saw Sarah's reflection in the glass, a small, terrified face. But for the briefest fraction of a second, her eyes, they seemed to shimmer. That same pale, sickly blue-white,
just like the thing staring in. A cold, heavy weight pressed against my back. Something dead, something clammy, like a hand, reaching out. I spun, frantic, pulling Sarah closer. There was nothing there. Just the water, swirling. "We can't stay," I gasped, my voice thin, reedy. "We have to go, up." I dragged Sarah, scrambling, up towards the last refuge, the attic. As I struggled, half wading, half climbing the stairs that were now mostly submerged, I felt it again. A cold, wet hand pressing into my back, pushing me. Go, now. But when I looked, there was no one there. Just the water, swirling. "We can't stay," I gasped, my voice thin, reedy. "We have to go, up." I dragged Sarah, scrambling, up towards the last refuge, the attic. As I struggled, half wading, half climbing the stairs that were now mostly submerged, I felt it again. A cold, wet hand pressing into my back, pushing me. Go, now. But when I looked, there was no one there. Just the shadows, moving. The attic, our last pathetic stronghold. The ceiling above us groaned. A deep, drawn-out sound, like a dying beast. Beams shifted, wood creaked. Water was already seeping through the floorboards, slowly, steadily. The whole house was coming apart around us. I knew it with a cold certainty.
Outside, the storm was a living thing, a monster roaring. The water, a dark, churning abyss. I looked at Sarah. Her small face was streaked with mud and tears, her eyes wide with fear. I have to get her out. I wrestled with the attic door, the small hatch that led to the outside. It gave way with a grunt. Wind howled, rain lashed at us. I saw the makeshift raft I'd tied to the railing days ago, a desperate, last-minute thought. It was still there, floating precariously, but still there. Just as I was about to set Sarah down, to try and get her onto it, I heard it, a soft gurgle, right behind me. I spun around. There it was, in the narrow doorway of the attic. Water dripped from its swollen form. Half its lower jaw was gone, leaving a gaping black hole. Its eyes were vacant, but in them, I saw it. A deep, deep disgust. For me, for us. I had no weapon, nothing, just my bare hands, and one choice. I pushed Sarah towards the opening, shoved her towards the raft. "Hold the rope! Climb, Sarah, climb!" The thing lunged, slow but relentless, its wet, soft hands reaching. I saw a loose beam of wood on the attic floor. I grabbed it, swung it with all my might, not at the creature, but at the main support beam above us, the central one. The house roared then, a terrible, shattering sound. Wood splintered. Dust, wet and thick, rained down. The creature paused, its head twisted, distracted by the shaking. Just for a second. That was all I needed. I pushed, shoved it back, with a final, desperate, sickening exertion. I heard bones creak, not just the creature's, the whole damn house. A section of the attic floor gave way beneath us, a gaping hole. The creature fell, flailing, churning the water that was now pouring in from above and below. The collapsing debris dragged it down. I scrambled, pulling Sarah through the narrow opening. Slammed the attic door shut just as the rest of the ceiling caved. The roar of the storm, the crash of breaking wood, all merged into one hellish sound. And as I pulled myself onto the raft, as my feet left the collapsing house, I felt it, something brush my leg, soft, scaly, like rotten flesh. Even though I was outside, even though it should have been gone. They saved us, or something like that. Pulled us from the water, from the wreckage, from the storm. Sarah, she was shivering, but she was alive. Days later, we were in a school gym, a temporary shelter. Everything smelled of disinfectant and wet dog. People, survivors, everywhere. The floodwaters were slowly going down. I could see the brown, muddy high water mark on the distant houses, ghost lines of what had been. I sat on a cot, a thin blanket around me. Sarah was asleep next to me, her small hand clutching her plastic boat. I looked out the dirty window. The water was receding, revealing more of the drowned world. Houses, just empty shells. A woman from the relief agency came over. She smiled, a kind smile, offered us a hot meal. "It's over, John," she said, her voice soft. "You and Sarah are safe." I nodded. My eyes stayed fixed on the window. I saw my reflection there, gaunt, haunted. But behind my reflection, in the retreating water below, something moved. A shadow. Long, faint, swimming. Slowly, purposefully. Not drifting with the current, but moving against it. It slid past a half-submerged lamppost. And for a split second, the lamppost's reflection in the water shimmered, distorted, into the shape of a swollen, pale limb. Just for a moment. Then it was gone. The lamppost was a lamppost again. The shadow continued its silent journey, disappeared under the water. I didn't say anything, couldn't, but my eyes were wide, fixed on that spot, on the empty water. I felt a cold dread, the kind that steals your breath, and a touch, a damp, clammy, scabrous touch on my arm, lingering, even after I pulled my arm away. It wasn't over. Not really. The water could go down, but what was inside it, and the broken world it had brought, that was part of me now, forever, lurking, just beneath the surface.